Everybody, welcome back to Illuminations. This is our interview series where we interview healing arts practitioners that are based here locally on Maui. So today we have with us the lovely Brooke Howsley. So thank you so much for coming today. We appreciate having you here, Brooke. And we're just going to get right into it. So why don't you share a little bit with us about who you are and the work that you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I am a former floral designer, so I come at this a little bit later in life than some, and I was struggled through a series of events in my own life. I had some grief that took me on a spiritual journey. Through that spiritual journey, I realized that I could be a healer, and led us to move to Maui from Austin, Texas. So it's been pretty amazing. I never expected this to happen in my life, but it's amazing.
And how long have you been here on Maui?
Yeah, we moved here about a year and a half ago. We got some spiritual guidance under the blood red lunar eclipse of January 2019. A practitioner with in Australia, she sent me an email and she said, because I had asked her, I said, are we supposed to move somewhere else to unlock some things, in us? And she sent me an email back right as the moon got into the blood red phase and said, you're moving to Hawaii this year. And I had never been to Hawaii. So it was a little exciting, a little nerve wracking, and it has turned out beautifully since then. We've really settled in here.
That's really awesome. And so the work that you have come to do through your own healing journey that we'll talk more a little bit about shortly is shamanic energy healing and some of your background. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about what brought you to this type of work and what kind of training you had with the rainbow energy healing, and anything you want to share about that.
Yeah. So about 5.5 years ago, my husband and I, we both lost a parent. My mother-in-law passed away due to a Parkinson's-like syndrome. Later, my father committed suicide. And so it was quite a double punch to our family. And we tried a lot of healing modalities. A couple of months after losing them, we went to a medium and we were able to speak to them on the other side. I cried the whole session. I had the full hair standing up on the back of my neck as the energy came into the room. It really opened my eyes to the kinds of communications that you can have through the veil. And I hadn't really been privy to that before. And so I really started on this quest. So I saw an energy healing practitioner, and I believe she might have done some tapping, some Reiki on my head. And that night I started having visions. I'd never had clairvoyant type visions before. I was always an artist, tapping into that kind of creativity, but I started having these movies playing in my head, and that felt really significant. So in our healing journey, my husband and I sought out a very respected and supported ayahuasca group. And over the course of a year and a half, we did 4 3-day ceremonies. And I had some of the most profound experiences of my life doing that. As a control enthusiast, I don't lose control very often. I've never done any sort of plant medicine, I rarely even had too much alcohol in my life because I like to keep my finger. And so in the first ceremony, the first days I couldn't let go of control, and I wasn't really sure why people did plant medicine. I kept getting stuck in the bardo and in kind of a gray land. And the third day I had a unicorn spirit guide come to me, and he said, you can handle it. And so, as I'm going deeper and deeper into the medicine that day, you can't form thoughts, you forget you have a body. I just kept repeating kind of comically in my head, the unicorn said I could handle this. And I came out of that deeper part of the medicine, kind of into the tail of the experience where you can form thoughts. And I asked lots of questions. The unicorn flew me up over the world. I saw this rainbow blanket of energy, of love, the world. And I turned to the unicorn and I said, what's your name? I don't want to forget this experience. And he said, my name is Gary. And I was like, but that was my dad's name. And I just am getting thinking about it. And I was like, oh my God, my gun-toting Texas, father came back as my unicorn spirit guide to be with me and tell me that I could handle it in this lifetime. And I cried and released all that grief that I'd been storing for so many months. Cried and cried and cried. And the songs that, that were being sung at the ceremony and all of the people that were there to give me hugs and support just completely transformed that grief. And so as that relates to the modalities that I ended up training in those same ayahuasca ceremonies, I started realizing I was playing with rainbows like they were slinkies in my hands, and I could direct them towards myself, towards other people. And it really took me about 6 months to Google that. Oh, there's a guy in Toronto, this really amazing healer in Toronto named Chris Kasurian that channeled this modality, rainbow energy healing, probably between 5 and 10 years ago, I think. And he teaches classes. And so I flew up there, gathered all the, financial resources that I had at the moment. It seemed like kind of a big step to take. And all the guidance that I got was like, this is what you need to do. Just trust. So flew up there, learned how to run, a full energy healing session. And that really kicked off me doing it in a more professional way.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh when you said Gary. I was like, Gary the unicorn. I love it.
I do all of it simultaneously.
Well, that's so cool. And what a special way to have your dad come back to you too. I mean, really, because I lost my father 4 years ago. So I know that they do come in very mysterious ways. And being from Wisconsin, my dad was also a gun-toting and a hunter and all this stuff. But he comes back to me as dragonflies and actually moths, which is really funny. And dragonfly for my son actually is what it was. And moths for me, which to me represent nighttime butterfly because he had already passed. But it's crazy how many moths come around, and really big ones, sometimes this big. There was one in our garage the other night that was that big, and I'm just and then the next night he was flying around our yard. It's just so funny. But anyway, but that would be really fun as a unicorn. I love it. And it shows the power of the medicine too, really, and what it is, why it's there, and how it can be used in a really healing and powerful way. So that's really cool. And then that further that you were able to follow your calling and kind of bring that into being for yourself and to follow the journey of where it was leading you. So
that was definitely an entrance into a phase of my life that would be all about surrendering and trusting. Mm-hmm. And that was all part of my own personal healing, because I was used to being a classic Western entrepreneur where you force things to happen, you work 80-hour work weeks, you do whatever it takes because otherwise you won't succeed, And so really relaxing and trying to balance out my masculine and feminine sides. It's kind of the classic wounded healer story. I had to go in and do all of these things for myself. And then as I see it in clients, as you spoke to earlier, it's easier to navigate or to know what to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. My teacher, Alberto Vildo, often says that you can only bring your client as far as you've gone. And so it's the work that you've done that you're able to help somebody get to that place. and really turn your wounds into your greatest gifts and strengths, you know. So we go, the way I see it is that we go through all this, the reason being, so once we transform it, we then can then give back to others what we were given. And that is, it's very humbling to be able to do that for people. I find it, and I'm sure you do too, like, because you've worked with me before, so I can attest to your amazing work. And so do you want to tell us a little bit about your training that you had, or anything kind of takeaways from that?
Yeah. So in classic rainbow energy healing, the client would lay on a massage table in front of the practitioner, and it's largely a silent modality. So, and it's based on archangels, the way that Chris Kasurian taught it. So archangels Michael, Metatron, Raziel, and then Raphael also. So I invoke those in the opening prayer. And then my own guidance has led me to like a stream of consciousness guided meditation for the hour that the client is resting. A lot of times people feel like a weighted blanket has kind of been put on top of them, this really beautiful, calm, harmonious type of energy. And so what I do is I close my eyes and I go in and I can kind of feel, as I'm closing my eyes, I'm receiving clairvoyant, clairaudient, all different types of feelings also in my own body. And so I'm just explaining what I'm witnessing. So it's not that I'm necessarily, and you know quite a bit about this, Sarah, it's not that I'm necessarily doing anything. It's more like I am invoking the right circumstances and then witnessing what's occurring. There might be animal spirit guides that come in. There might be galactic family or past or future versions of the client or even myself that come in and interact and release people from something that they're seeking to be released from, give them messages. It's a huge range. And in fact, in every session that I do, something completely unique and creative happens. And that is part of the joy of it for me. I never know what's to come into the session. So in a wonderful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that's really beautiful. When you, so since you've moved to Maui, so you kind of, was it 5.5 years ago you went through the training, or that's when your parents?
That's actually when our parents transitioned into spirit. And then a year and a half ago, it was actually March 2019 is when I flew to Toronto to do the training.
Oh, okay.
And so it's been since then that I've been developing what I do. I utilize a lot of crystals. This is one Sara happened to give me. I found objects. I use sacred smoke, so vetiver roots grown on Hawaii. I use essential oils like balance. So in the beginning of the session, it's a non-touch modality, except for in the beginning, I like to place my hands over the hands and feet of the client in order to really get a grounding. And I've noticed that that's when, as soon as I place my hands over hands and feet, I start to get that download of information. It's like it sparks something, the connection between the client and myself.
That's awesome. And have you found that since you've been to Maui, has it even like changed or grown the way you practice?
It has. In fact, it was the same wonderful healer that predicted that we would move to Maui. She also said that we would find new spirit guides when we came here. And so my rational mind was trying to figure that out. And the way that it occurred was in September of 2019, after we'd moved here and lived here for a few months, I was in Iao Valley and I was on a retreat. Bridget Nielsen from Sedona hosted a Divine Feminine retreat. And so we were sitting in Iao Valley and a grandmother Hawaiian came and was bringing the petals and encouraging me to, get under the waterfall. I think actually that was in haiku, but she was kind of coming in over this course of several days. And I was like, I've never seen that guide before. I don't have a grandmother Hawaiian guide. So we did this beautiful meditation with this group of women, and there was a basket, and the grandmother that she had been tossing the flower petals out of, she handed the basket to me. And it was known that now I was the person that was supposed to be gathering the groups of women. I was the person that was supposed to be initiating some circles. And I felt the responsibility and the honor of that from her. And I looked over, and there was like a warrior, like ancient Hawaiian warrior, bare chested, super good looking. I was like, I totally scored. And as we walked over to the stream to do this surrendering into the water kind of component, he was up on the ridge, and he had all these other male warriors with him. So they were holding the divine masculine while we were in the stream doing the divine feminine work. And it took me a while to realize, like, I started to have past life recall, that he was my partner in a past life. She was his partner, and she was a healer. And we were kind of this triangle. And I exited that life very early. So now they're back, and they're helping me in this lifetime to do. So she's, grandmother Hawaiian. I often ask her for a channeled message before each session. And in my mind's eye, I can see the client's higher self come in. Grandmother Hawaiian can put a lei over them or show them certain things about themselves kind of in the few moments while I'm trying to prepare right before the session. So that's been a powerful Maui specific thing that has happened here.
That's amazing. The energy at Iao Valley is so incredible. For any of you who may be watching that haven't ever been here to Maui, it's a beautiful, fertile valley and stream, and it has quite a history, actually quite a violent history. There's been battles there, and so there's a lot of intense energies I find there, but a lot of just really beautiful, powerful energy. It's one of the best places to go, in my opinion, to just if you need to wash off something. Like, I love to, my kumu teacher for Lomi Lomi was Gina up at Ho'omana Spa, and she took us on a trip there and showed us this area. Of course, it's totally gone after the big flood that we had a couple years ago, but there was not gone, but it's totally rearranged. There was this area where there was these big boulders and a waterfall that she would have us lay under, and you would hold yourself as the water washed over you. And it was, whenever I need a good cleanse, I just go lay in those waterfalls, and it is really, it's so cleansing, and just really, it's really cool to hear about the experience that you had there, because I think there's a lot of spirit there. So
we're lucky to have those places here. I would say in Central Texas, not that there weren't places like that, but I can feel the mana here a lot stronger than I was able to.
Yeah, and I think, not to get too far off on this, but there's a lot of land reactivation that could be done on the mainland that would help some of those old sacred sites, and some of the more power points or vortexes, or just places where I used to manage a bar in my 20s, that a restaurant bar that was right on the Mississippi River, on these old sacred land and waterfalls of the American Indians that were there at the time. But now it's become I forget, the engineer corps came in and built like what do you call it? I can't remember, like a dam, and then it's all concrete now. And it's still very pretty where the area is, but when I would look out at the river and think, like, this used to be such a sacred site, and now it's right downtown Minneapolis, and there is so much energy and commercial and cars and things that I think it's lost that sacredness. So to go into those places and reactivate them, and to honor the energy of that land is so important. And here on Maui and in Hawaii, it's very, like you said, the mana is so much more present, and more untouched, even with as much tourism as there is here and human traffic. There's a far less, commercial pollutants. I think that really downgrades that energy. So it's very alive here. The land is very alive here. So anyway, now let's see. So when you're doing your healing sessions, you're incorporating these guides and they're informing you in new ways, I would imagine now that you've been here. And is there anything else you want to share about what a session looks like with you? Like if a client were to book with you, what to expect and that sort of thing, how they should prepare for a session?
Yeah, it's always advised to take at least 10 minutes before a session to tune into what patterns keep coming up in your life. What relationships, are there sticky points in relationships that you'd like to explore further? And then also to kind of have an open playfulness about it, because things can come up that you wouldn't expect. So as people are laying down, I'm always really fascinated by the kinds of messages that I get. An example would be, so I work with this one client regularly, and I saw in her solar plexus, I had intuitively pulled oranges and put or tangerines from the land here. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I do use fruit and various things, but when I got to that solar plexus, I was like, for some reason, I see you in Tuscany. Like, why would I see you in Tuscany? And she said, well, I just started a new relationship. And I said, if I ever got married, I would do it in Tuscany. And I was like, oh my gosh, like the message didn't mean anything to me, but it had a lot of meaning for her. So it's always really wonderful when I receive something and I am able to relay it to the client, and they bring a lot more meaning to it. Although I'd have to say, I'm not a psychic medium, and I think there is a distinct difference there. Mm-hmm. I really try not to predict too many future kinds of things, because timelines shift all the time. You could, walk out the door and by your own free will choose a different timeline. Those kinds of specific questions, like, will I marry someone with blonde hair and blue eyes? Like, that's not really the type of session that I give, but other people might excel at that type of.
I think that's great to make that distinction, because I think that is a tendency that I've experienced with clients, is they expect you to see the visions of the future, and whether or not you do, all possibilities are endless and exist all at once. And so these timelines that you're mentioning, it's like, as a psychic, you can activate one and pull it in and make it more present to that person because you've brought attention to it and activated it. And it's not a critique or anything, but like you said, with free will, it's like any of these timelines can be activated, or what my teacher calls destiny lines. So it's like a lot of it comes into conscious co-creation of, what do you want to activate? What are your intentions? What do you want to experience? And then going there, and there's certainly clues along the way. And I love that. I love that how intuition works like that, or clairvoyance, where you'll just get this hit. And then you, as the practitioner, you're like, I have no idea what this means. And I still get like hesitant, like, should I share that? What's like my left brain comes in like, that makes no sense. And it's like, of course it doesn't make sense to me. It's not for me. So right. I love that, that example of Tuscany. And it's just like, yeah, well, that was so meaningful to her. And that's usually the case too, when you are in this intangible world of intuition, where it feels like there's no concrete scientific evidence of like, this is real or this works, and that's something that I'm hoping gets more understood through these types of conversations, is that you can see these things and it's in that person's energy field. So that is really important to her. And maybe someday will come true with this person, or maybe with some other person, but so that's really cool. So what would you, when you're looking at the tools that you have and can share, How do you use these? Like, obviously use them with your clients, but how do you use them in your daily life to help guide your day when you're in the midst of, I know you have a daughter, right? And life and things that can get real busy. How do you keep yourself grounded in kind of both worlds, I guess?
Yeah, I actually have been upping my game a lot on that recently. Because I feel like for a while, as spirit was becoming really exciting, I was reading as many books as I could on all aspects of spirituality, like what happens between lives, and the whole Dolores Cannon kinds of QHHT stuff where she's regressing people to other planets. Like I really went as far out as I could into the spiritual world and explored as much as I could. And then I realized that I needed, just like you said, I needed to kind of ground myself a little bit more so that I could be a very balanced person. And so I still take advantage of a lot of channeled things. I listen to Lee Harris and Wendy Kennedy and lots of people that channel messages. I also have been sitting more regularly, channeling messages from my higher self, from other spirit guides, from Arcturian, Pleiadian, those types of beings. But then at the same time, I've been trying to focus on my physical body. And so I garden barefoot here right in my front yard in Hawaii. I go for walks on the beach barefoot quite a bit. I probably should do that more often. I take Epsom salt baths. I pull cards for myself. I pull oracle cards, for myself all the time. And then also taking care of the physical body, to me, I like to take the whole view. So this year, for example, I really took a deep dive into diet. So I did the Wild Fit program, which is all about seasonality and eating. So it strips away a lot of things like grains and dairy, caffeine, sugar. So I removed all of that from my diet and realized how much better I felt by getting back to what was just good for my constitution. Other people might be able to handle those things just fine, but my body needed to edit those things out. Giving up caffeine, drinking rasa, which I don't know if you're familiar with rasa. It's an adaptogenic herb blend that kind of tastes a little bit like something between coffee and tea. You can put some, Laird's MCT coconut creamer in it, and it replaces coffee. So I have these sort of daily or weekly things that I'm able to tap into to not only maintain my physical vessel, but my spiritual connection. And I've even, like in my life, I've gone pretty far down that rabbit hole. I've done coffee enemas to really cleanse my liver, castor oil packs. When we lived in New Zealand many years ago, I had symptoms of Lyme disease. So I did lots of tinctures and holistic healing that way. I get acupuncture and Chinese herbs. I visit an astrologer. So I try to have this really fun set of things. Like as I'm looking at my calendar, either for that day or for the week or month, as a 5 life path, numerologically, I need a lot of change, movement, and freedom. So I like to pepper my schedule with all of these grounding, spiritual, like kind of all over the place things. And so far, it's been incredibly fun, and they've all been kind of intuitively picked. If I see someone that does a modality that I'm not familiar with, and I get the intuitive nudge to access that kind of healing, I do. So it's mostly intuitively guided, I would say, at this point.
It's funny when you were describing all those things, I'm like, that sounds like so much fun. That's like how you ended it. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. That sounds fun. Now, and I love that too. I love that you mentioned that, having Lyme disease and, and treating it holistically, and how we really, because Western medicine doesn't always have a cure for autoimmune diseases, yet holistically, there's so much that we can do to treat inflammation and anything in that, in those kind of categories. And the diet you described is really great too. It's to be that clean vessel for energetically for things to come through. It's so important when there's not heavy toxins in the body that can kind of cause energetic blockages as well as physical ailments. So nicely done. That's awesome. It's a great example for other people. I meant to ask you before we started, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I thought it might be kind of fun in closing to just have you pick a card for us. I'm sure you may have a deck nearby.
Really, I was kind of thinking about that as I was setting up my phone before this session, and setting it on all my Oracle card decks, and that I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if we should do. So
yeah, I meant to ask you that. It's so funny when you mentioned that the phone was by the decks, and I still forgot. But yes, I don't know if we want to have an intention for, like, since we mentioned before we started today that 2021 about how a lot of people have thought that, oh, thank God 2020 is over. And to me, I just see it as this was like such an incredible year for opportunity for growth, and to really learn and take an honest inventory of what is working and not working in our lives, and where we have been, where we have come to being out of alignment, because so much was either taken away or changed that people suffered a lot with loss and change. But yet, what was it that wasn't working that we're grieving, right? And then where is it that we can start to bring something in that's new, that will cause us to have more happiness and greater alignment. And you mentioned 5, the number of change. Like, I think this is just 2021 actually equals 5. So I'm like, it ain't over. But it would be nice to have some guidance for it, because change is hard. It's, the ego clings onto patterns and structure because it's familiar, and then it can feel comfortable and safe. And so when that's taken away, it really threatens the ego to the point that it feels like almost as if you're going to die, because the systems are changing and there's no reference point. So, but it's just about beginning anew, or building on what we've already learned, and going from there. But I am one who is always open for advice. Like, if there's any guidance you can give us for the coming year, since it's January still.
Exactly. So as you were saying that last part,
Wow, rebirth.
Look at, there's this beautiful full moon kind of, in the back of the card. So I can read the card message also. We can flip to that. Oh my goodness.
Well, and I just want to say real quick too, is I love looking at the imagery of the card before reading it, and looking at that. I think it's gonna be a full moon soon. And I don't know the date off the top of my head, but the bat's medicine being that of rebirth. So that's just really cool to see how it's like kind of holding the moon in its wings. And the moon too is just that never ending symbol of change, growing and waning, and like, yeah, it's so cool, because it's like, it's a constant cycle of, growth, expansion, and contraction, really, which is what life is, and the spiritual journey for those of us who are aware that we're on it.
So, as we're going through those cycles, it's not just a circle, it's a spiral up. So it's like we might think we're coming back to the same spot, but we have this new perspective, which is really great. So the Kim Cran's what she is saying about that, it's all about darkness, letting go, and death leading to rebirth. So I'd say that really characterizes this past year. It says, before emerging, the bat waits for the sun to set and the moon to rise. In the darkness, it can see all that was invisible in the daylight hours. The bat is a master of the subtle senses of the underlying forces that cause some things to prosper and others to fade. The bat card shows up to signify the ending of a chapter, the closing of a door. The bat comes swiftly, encouraging us to move on. In just a few hours, a new day dawns. No more lingering in the past.
That's perfect.
That's cool. And a lot of the channeled messages that I've gotten for the past year, the guides really talk about like a new dawn and a new day, like capital letters. Like humanity is really stepping, in our lifetimes is really stepping into something that's very different than has happened on Earth in a long time. So I'm excited by that. It's
Mhm.
not easy to go through the loss and the grief, but there's still so much to look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Well, I think that's a great message that we can end with, and something that you probably help assist your clients with as well. It's like a great symbolism as well for the work that you do. And because when we heal, we do in a way die to an old part of our being so that we can be reborn into something that's more, like I was saying, in alignment and more powerful for where we're at today in the present. So do you have any last words, any words of wisdom for those that may be out there wanting to join the healer's realm on that path?
Gosh, I think everybody is a healer, and it's kind of just allowing yourself to awaken to whatever your intuitive gifts are. With me, a lot of times I wake up in the middle of the night when all of the energetics of the world are very quiet, and so I can sense the minute, kind of very subtle energies that are within. Um, so definitely carve out those moments. I would say whether, if you have multiple kiddos and you can step into a bath with a candle and just, do that, like any opportunity you can to get silent. Um, I could even recommend, I did the Kapasana 10-day silent retreat here on Maui just about a year ago. And it was so profound. I mean, we turned in our cell phones at the beginning. I had no idea what was happening in the outside world for 10 days. And who can say that these days, that we're that undistracted and internally focused? So I really got to some dissolving into the universe moments at that retreat. And I wish I could do it again this year.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and sharing your gifts with our community. So Brooke can be found either here at 808 Wellness or out in Haiku, right? That's where you are?
Yeah.
Yep. And so she does personalized treatments here at the Healing Spa and Yoga Studio. So if you want a session with her, please inquire with us about how to book with her. And during these times, of course, we can do both virtual and in person. So so just let us know if you're interested. And we thank you again so much for joining us today. And we look forward to more from you soon.
Thank you, Sara. This has been amazing.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks so much. Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.